The brainstorm room always hit me first, with its light too bright, too white, too clinical for a space meant to spark anything human. The ceiling panels hummed with that sterile electricity, turning everyone's skin a shade cooler, their expressions a shade harsher. I stepped inside and let the door close behind me, the soft hiss of the AC brushing across my neck like a reminder. Stay contained, stay composed, stay 3 steps ahead. I took my usual seat at the end of the glass table, the cold surface pressing lightly against my forearms. The chairs were those modern corporate ones, ergonomic, expensive, yet somehow designed to keep you from ever fully relaxing. I could feel the familiar shift in the room the moment I sat down. No words, just micro-gestures. A quick glance exchanged between 2 coworkers, the slight tightening of someone's jaw, a polite half-smile that didn't touch the eyes. The same choreography I'd been watching for years. People underestimate how loud silence can be for a Black woman in corporate America. Not the kind of loud that fills the air, but the kind that seeps under your skin, quiet judgments disguised as neutrality, assumptions tucked neatly behind professionalism. I felt it pooling around me as the others settled in. The weight of being seen but not fully regarded. Heard, but only selectively. Smart, but according to their unspoken categories, best used sparingly. The AC above turned up a notch, and the air shifted colder. My arms prickled as I watched the whiteboard come into focus. Someone had already written, Emotion vs. Data in blue marker, underlined twice with confidence. I knew exactly where this was going. I'd been in these rooms long enough to know my lane, at least the one they drew for me. A coworker across the table leaned back in his chair, crossing one ankle over his knee. The motion was casual, easy, full of the comfort that comes with believing the room is built for you. He caught my eye and gave a small nod that read less like acknowledgement and more like place yourself. Another tapped her pen not loudly, but with that rhythm that says, we're waiting to begin, and we're deciding if you get to matter today. I inhaled slowly, letting the breath steady me. Quiet power isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It sits inside you like a coiled line of heat, warm but contained, waiting for the right moment. My grandmother always said, "Baby, you don't walk into rooms with noise. You walk in with truth. Let them feel you before you speak." So I didn't rush to speak. I didn't fight the silence. I let it settle. Let them grow aware of the stillness around me, like the calm that comes right before a weather shift. There's a kind of authority in not scrambling to prove yourself, in not performing, in not trying to preempt their doubts or soothe their insecurities. The creative director began outlining the brief, a new campaign for a major client: storytelling, emotion, cultural nuance, authenticity. I listened closely, even as I watched the subtle reactions around me. The slight tilt of someone's head when he said the word emotion. The almost imperceptible side-eye in my direction, as if emotion was a land I walked in by default, a place they thought I lived in too deeply to understand structure or strategy. My fingers traced the edge of my notebook lightly. I kept my face still, expression neutral. Inside, I felt the familiar layering of emotions: clarity, caution, a simmering steadiness. Not anger, not defensiveness. Something sharper, something ancestral. The quiet knowing that comes from generations of navigating spaces that weren't designed to hold our full brilliance. When someone finally asked for ideas, the room shifted its weight. People adjusted posture, eager to speak, eager to be the one with the smart take. I waited, not out of hesitation, but precision, because timing matters in these rooms. And Black women learn early that the wrong moment can drown even the smartest thought. I shared a concept: measured, intentional, grounded in emotional intelligence and real human behavior. As I spoke, I saw the reactions ripple. A forced smile here, a tight throat swallow there, the surface-level politeness that hides skepticism. They didn't interrupt, but they didn't reach for the idea either. It hung in the air, beautiful and vulnerable, like something they weren't sure they were allowed to touch. When I finished, no one responded right away. The silence wasn't empty. It was evaluative, dissecting. Someone wrote something on their laptop without looking up. Another took a sip of iced coffee, eyes drifting past me as if what I'd said was already irrelevant. The creative director cleared his throat. For a moment, I felt the old familiar heat rise in my chest, not insecurity, but recognition. The same pattern, the same undercurrent. She's emotional. She doesn't have the data. She sees things too softly. But I didn't let the heat spill over. I let it settle into something steadier, something more powerful. The quiet shift inside me was almost imperceptible, but it was there. A small pivot of intention, a subtle adjustment in how I planned to move. My eyes traveled slowly across the room. Not challenging, not confrontational, just observant. I could see everything. The doubt, the assumptions, the underestimation. They thought they'd pegged me already. Thought they knew what box I fit in. Thought they could predict the ceiling of my contribution before I even reached it. They didn't know I'd already started planning. They didn't know the real work was happening beneath their radar. They didn't know the quietest person at the table can be the one shifting the entire room. I sat up a little straighter, just slightly. A movement small enough to go unnoticed unless you were really looking. But it signaled something to myself. A confirmation of who I was and how I intended to move from this moment forward. The meeting continued around me, voices overlapping, ideas being thrown out carelessly, the usual creative chaos. But I stayed in that still, centered place. Each inhale slow, each exhale anchored. By the time the brainstorm wrapped, I had said only what needed to be said. No more, no less. My quiet power remained intact, untouched by their projections. As we stood to leave, I caught my reflection in the glass wall, shoulders relaxed, face calm, eyes sharper than they realized. I looked like someone they underestimated, someone they thought they had figured out, someone who would move predictably. They were wrong. The shift had already begun, and none of them had noticed. Would you walk away or fight back? Tell me in the comments. The next morning, the office felt heavier, like the air already knew where the fractures would form. I walked down the hallway past the framed campaign posters, each one celebrating a team that rarely looked like me. The floor-to-ceiling windows cast long strips of sunlight across the carpet, but inside the brainstorm room, everything still felt cold. I stepped in quietly, still carrying that calm from yesterday, that quiet centeredness. People were already seated, laptops open, the usual morning choreography of forced cheer and caffeine. I noticed how their voices softened when I walked in, polite, careful, but their eyes said the familiar thing. She's here, remember to manage her. That strange blend of niceness and dismissal that Black women feel long before anyone says a word. I took the same seat as before. Not out of routine, but strategy. Consistency unsettles people who expect you to shrink or adjust to whatever space they give you. The glass table reflected the overhead lights, and for a moment my face appeared doubled, my expression calm on the surface, my truth sharper beneath. I placed my notebook down slowly, the faint thud sounding louder than it should have in the quiet. The creative director started speaking again about aligning story direction with data-backed rationale, and I felt the room's energy brace itself. That subtle tightening that happens when people know a moment is coming, but pretend they don't. He clicked to the next slide: charts, numbers, projections, and I sensed impatience building. The kind directed at the kind of creativity that doesn't show up on spreadsheets. Then it began. Small, at first. Almost nothing. Someone exhaled sharply through their nose, the kind of half-laugh used when they think they're being subtle. Another tapped her pen faster, rhythm shifting into something sharper, not thoughtful but irritated. My idea from yesterday was on the agenda, but barely one tiny bullet point, tucked near the bottom, as if it had wandered onto the slide by accident. I leaned back slightly, keeping my posture relaxed. Posture is power. Silence, too. The creative director asked for feedback. The room paused for half a breath, and that was all it took for the first crack to show. A man 2 seats down spoke without looking at me. It's just, there's not enough data to support an emotional-led concept right now. His fingers drummed on the table, fast, confident, certain of the correctness of his statement. Before he finished, someone else added, "Yeah, it feels too emotional. There's no solid framework." The word emotional lingered in the air like a verdict, like a scarlet letter they wanted to pin on me. And they didn't say my name, but every syllable was aimed in my direction. I watched the microaggressions, a woman adjusting her glasses to avoid eye contact, someone lifting their cup just to have something to look at, another nodding along as if rehearsing his part in a play he didn't audition for. The room wasn't loud, but it vibrated with something tense, something sharp-edged, that specific brand of corporate American silence where disrespect wraps itself in professionalism, the kind where no one raises their voice because they don't have to. They've perfected the art of diminishing without volume. I didn't react. Not outwardly, not even with a shift in my breathing. Inside, though, I felt that familiar sensation. A tightening, a focusing, not hurt clarity. The kind that comes when a line gets drawn in a place you didn't draw it, and suddenly you can see the entire map of how they view you. Someone across from me finally glanced my way, almost apologetically, like he knew the comments were directed at me but didn't plan to intervene. His eyes dropped quickly when he saw I wasn't flinching. That unsettles people more than anger when a black woman refuses to play the emotional role they've assigned her. The junior strategist spoke up next, her voice lighter but still cutting. We should prioritize approaches grounded in logic, not feelings. She said feelings like it was a contaminant, like creativity rooted in humanity didn't belong in the same room as data. I felt the crack widen not in my confidence, but in the illusion that we were all being evaluated on equal terms. Their discomfort with my idea wasn't about the work. It was about the kind of intelligence they didn't know how to measure, the kind that comes from lived experience, not analytics dashboards. I inhaled once, slow. The air felt colder. Everything felt louder. The clicking of keyboards, the subtle rustle of paper, the tap-tap-tap of that same pen. Corporate meetings have a sound when they turn against you. Not shouting, not confrontations, just coordinated dismissal. The creative director cleared his throat again, sensing the tension but not addressing it. "Let's park that concept for now," he said, already clicking to the next slide. Park. The word hung like a stop sign. A polite way of burying something without admitting that's what you're doing. As the discussion moved on, the room relaxed. Shoulders dropped. Voices warmed again. Their comfort returned. And it became painfully clear my presence had been the disruption, not their bias. I didn't say a word. Not because I was silenced, but because I was choosing something more powerful than defending myself. I let the comments sit in the air, exactly as they were delivered, casual, careless, unexamined. And I let the room reveal itself to me. All the cracks, all the weak points, all the assumptions. And as they moved on without me, without my idea, without even realizing they were creating the exact opening I needed, I felt something settle deep inside my chest. A shift, a decision. A quiet, precise understanding. This was the moment everything would turn, not when they mocked the idea, not when they dismissed me, but when I recognized that their underestimation wasn't an obstacle. It was leverage. The first crack had appeared. They didn't realize what that meant. But I did. Be honest. What would you do if it was you sitting in that room? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear you. When the meeting ended, people scattered into the hallway with the usual buzz-talking weekend plans, Slack pings, small jokes that felt lighter now that they'd moved past the part where I was expected to shrink. I walked out last. Not because I was lingering, but because I needed a moment to let the air settle around me again. Corporate silence takes something from you if you don't pause long enough to reclaim it. I headed toward my desk, passing the row of office plants everyone pretended not to kill, and the wall of employee spotlight photos that always seemed to feature the same faces. Sunlight hit my workstation like a soft spotlight, warming the edge of my desk even as the room remained cold. I sat down slowly, letting my shoulders relax for the first time that morning. I opened my laptop, and there it was. Concept draft, emotional arc pathway, D3. The same file they had reduced to too emotional, as if the word wasn't the heartbeat of every campaign that ever mattered. I clicked it open. The screen glowed with the slides. It built at 1:17 a.m. timestamp proof of the hours they never counted, but somehow always expected. Each slide held the kind of detail they didn't know how to measure. A mother's laugh caught mid-breath. A worn basketball hoop in the background of a childhood memory. A moment where someone chooses truth over resume polish. The tiny gestures people mistake for weakness, but are really strength in motion. I scrolled through my notes. Emotion isn't softness. It's clarity. Focus on human tension points, not manufactured ones. Insight connected to lived experience is still insight. The language was precise, intentional. There was nothing messy about it, no excess, no flourish. Just clean, sharp storytelling shaped from a lifetime of watching people underestimate the intelligence behind emotional truth. My cursor lingered over the last modified timestamp again. I remembered exactly how that night felt. The quiet apartment, the warm lamplight, my fingers moving across the keys with a confidence the office never granted me. That version of me felt freer, unobserved, unfiltered. I scrolled to the final slide. The ending line read, "Emotion earns trust. Trust earns conversion. Data follows both." I exhaled slowly, not in frustration, in recognition, because I knew this work deserved to be seen by someone who understood what it was actually doing. My inbox sat open on the second screen. A blank draft waited at the top, subject line empty, body untouched. I clicked into it and let the formatting bar blink awake. Subject: optional direction for review. Prepared by Lisa Monroe. I typed the client's name into the to field and added a short, clean note. Sharing an alternate pathway for your consideration. Light lift. No rush on review. No explanation. No justification. No. Just wanted to share. Or, hope this isn't too much. Those words aren't mine. I attached the file and sat back, letting my hand rest lightly on the mouse. The room around me hummed with casual office noise, keyboard clicks, muffled conversations, distant laughter from the design pod. None of it reached me. I was in that quiet pocket where decisions get made and everything becomes clear. Before hitting send, I read the email once more, not to check for errors, but to check my intention. Was I seeking validation? No. Was I trying to prove the room wrong? Not even that. I was honoring the work, honoring myself, honoring the truths they dismissed because they didn't fit into their frameworks. I clicked send. The small whoosh sound hit the air, barely noticeable, easily lost in the office haze. But to me, it felt like a seismic shift. No one turned. No one knew. No one saw the email leave my outbox. And that anonymity was the point. Quiet moves travel farther than loud ones. I closed the tab, reopened the presentation deck everyone else was working on, and blended back into the rhythm of the office. My face stayed neutral, my breathing even, my posture steady. If anyone passed my desk, they'd see nothing out of place, nothing extraordinary. But inside, the ground had already shifted. A new timeline had begun, one they weren't aware of yet. They thought the first crack was in my idea, but the real crack was in their assumption that I needed their permission. I leaned back in my chair, fingers resting lightly on the keyboard. Invisible to them, undeniable to me. The evidence was out there now, quiet, precise, and unmistakably mine. By the time the afternoon light slid across the office floor, the energy in the building had shifted into that restless, pre-meeting hum. People gathered their laptops, checked their hair in the dark reflection of their screens, adjusted their collars like a client call was a performance they had to costume themselves for. I watched them from my desk, calm, quiet, intentional. The email I'd sent earlier sat somewhere in the client's inbox, now small, unseen, a quiet spark waiting for oxygen. I didn't hover over my sent folder. I didn't refresh. I didn't track. You learn, as a Black woman in corporate America, that watching something too closely can give away what you're protecting. And this idea, my idea, needed stillness around it. It needed room to breathe before the storm. I opened the team deck. Not the version everyone else saw, but the one I kept for myself. A cleaner cut, a sharper narrative. I dragged a slider into place, adjusting a transition that had felt too abrupt earlier. I switched a color that didn't sit right on the emotional arc. I tightened a sentence to make it land more precisely. Everything I touched, I sharpened. Not rushed, not frantic, just controlled. Quiet power doesn't move loudly, it moves with craftsmanship. Around me, the room shifted with small sounds, clicking pens, someone muttering under their breath, the soft thud of a notebook closing. People were preparing, but they weren't preparing like I was. They were rehearsing a presentation. I was fortifying a truth. I stood and walked toward the small focus room near the window. The door shut behind me with a soft click, cutting the office noise down to a low hum. The room was warm, sun-soaked, with just enough space to breathe. I set my notebook down and leaned against the wall. The sunlight hit half my face, leaving the other half in shadow, a cinematic split that felt exactly like the reality of being seen only in pieces. I inhaled slowly, let the air expand my lungs. Exhaled even slower. Let it settle. This was the part people didn't see. The preparation that wasn't about slides or aesthetics, but about emotional discipline. Not the kind of discipline they accuse us of lacking, too sensitive, too reactive, too emotional, but the kind that takes years to build. Generational. Learned in kitchens and back porches and whispered reminders before school. Don't let them shake you. Stay centered. Hold your truth steady. That kind of discipline. I closed my eyes for a moment and pictured the call. Not the faces, not the reactions, just the energy. The shift that would happen when they realized what they had almost thrown away. I didn't need credit. I didn't need applause. I just needed the truth to land where it belonged. The door opened slightly as someone peeked in. Hey, Lisa, you joining the prep? I opened my eyes. In a minute, my voice was calm, steady, unbothered, not defensive, not rushed. He nodded and left, but I saw the confusion in his face. How could I be this quiet, this centered? Didn't I need validation after the morning's comments? Didn't I want to fight back? No. Quiet power doesn't argue. Quiet power positions itself. I returned to my desk with a renewed steadiness. I inserted my headphones, not for music, just for space. The world softened, became muted, almost cinematic. I went through the deck again, slide by slide, breathing into each moment. I didn't need to fix everything. I needed to refine what mattered. At one point, someone leaned over from the next desk. "You good?" It was the kind of question that pretended to be concern but was really surveillance. "Yes." One word. Grounded. Absolute. He blinked as if he expected more. Maybe reassurance. Maybe explanation. But I didn't offer either. I turned back to my screen and let the silence speak for me. When the meeting reminder flashed across my monitor, "client call in 15 minutes, I felt nothing spike in my chest. No nerves. No fear. No need to brace. The moment had already been decided. Not by luck. Not by fate. But by work. Mine. I gathered my notebook, closed my laptop gently, and began walking toward the main conference room. The glass walls reflected back the entire office, busy, buzzing, unaware that the trajectory of this project had already shifted. My reflection walked with me, steady, composed, shoulders relaxed. I stepped into the conference room. The lighting was warm here, softer than the brainstorm room. The long table gleamed under the recessed ceiling panels, and the screen on the far wall displayed the client's waiting room splash screen. A single blue circle rotated slowly, like a breath being held. People filed in behind me, chatting, straightening sweaters, clearing throats. Their energy was anxious but casual. Mine was still. It wasn't confidence in the conventional sense. It was alignment, a knowing. I took my seat at the middle of the table, not at the head, not at the margins. Centered, equal, present. My teammates glanced at me, probably expecting a trace of insecurity from this morning, some hint that their comments had landed, but I was unreadable. Purposefully. "Everyone ready?" the creative director asked. There were nods around the table. I simply folded my hands. Still. Waiting. Grounded. The last 5 minutes ticked by slowly, each second thick with anticipation. I watched the little blue circle turn. Again and again, a quiet countdown to the moment the room would shift without warning. My breathing stayed steady. The air seemed to narrow into a single, focused line. My pulse didn't rise. My expression didn't change. All I felt was clarity. Pure, unwavering clarity. I had done the work. I had moved with intention. I had positioned the truth where it could be seen. And now, the moment was coming, not loud, not dramatic, but precise and inevitable. Quiet power was in motion, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop what was already on its way. You won't believe what happens next. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. The client's logo flashed onto the screen, and the polite corporate chime echoed through the conference room as they joined. A few faces appeared one by one, arranged neatly in their virtual boxes. Sharp suits, clean lighting, practiced smiles. Their CEO's frame lit up last, his background a sleek office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown. Everyone on our side straightened at once. You could feel the shift in posture, like a wave shirt smoothed. Eyes widened, hands folded with exaggerated professionalism. It always amazed me how people transformed the second a senior leader appeared, as if presence alone rewrote the script of the room. I didn't change anything. My shoulders stayed exactly where they were, relaxed and steady. My breath moved evenly. Quiet power doesn't adjust for optics. It simply holds. The creative director opened the meeting, his tone warm but overly polished. "Thanks everyone for joining. We're excited to walk you through the concepts we've been developing." Everyone on our end nodded, too eagerly. Everyone on theirs waited, politely expressionless. The deck began. Slide after slide of the safe direction. Data points. Customer journeys. Conversion estimates. Everything packaged in the kind of language corporate America trusts because they think it sounds objective. The room was quiet. painfully quiet as the team presented. A few strategic smiles. A nod here. A thoughtful, there. But nothing real. Nothing warm. Nothing alive. Then the CEO raised a hand. Just slightly. Barely a movement. But enough to freeze everyone mid-sentence. "Before we go further," he said, "I'd like to talk about the alternate direction we received." The air snapped. Time folded in on itself. Every eye in the conference room shifted fast, sharp, almost panicked. Alternate direction? Received where? From who? I didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't adjust even a fraction. He continued, leaning forward. "Actually, we love the emotional direction. It stood out immediately. It's the clearest expression of what our brand actually needs. Silence. Pure, thick, cutting silence. You could feel it crawl across the table, settle into the corners of the room, wrap itself around every person who had dismissed me the day before. My coworkers stared at the screen like it had betrayed them, or like the CEO had spoken in a language they didn't expect to hear." The creative director cleared his throat, trying to recover. "Of course, the emotional concept. Yes, that one." But the CEO wasn't talking to him anymore. His gaze softened, turning curious. "And I want to know who created this one?" The question dropped into the room like a stone into still water. No movement, no sound, just impact. Camera. Shift. Focus. The world seemed to tilt, drawing every glance to me with magnetic force. I didn't smile, didn't lean forward, didn't announce a single thing. Quiet power doesn't reach for recognition. It lets recognition come to it. My colleagues' eyes darted around, first at each other, then at the director, then, reluctantly, toward me. Someone's jaw tensed. Another's breath caught audibly. A third swallowed hard, color rising beneath her collar. The CEO spoke again. The emotional clarity, the human pacing, the insight into lived experience. Whoever made this understands narrative on a deeper level. Every word he said landed like a chisel striking stone, carving truth into the room. Truth they could no longer bend, dismiss, or dilute. The creative director tried to recover again. "Well, the team collaborated on—" "No," the CEO interrupted gently but firmly. "This one has a distinct voice." "Who created it?" The attention tightened around me like a spotlight quiet. Absolute. But still, I didn't speak. Not to be coy, not to be dramatic, but because silence at the right moment is a form of mastery. The creative director looked at me hesitant, caught, searching for a way to reframe the moment. I met his eyes with calm composure. I didn't bail him out, didn't shrink to ease his discomfort, didn't nod to soften the truth. I held the silence steady. I let it breathe. I let it demand honesty. Finally, someone from the team spoke, her voice small. "I think that was Lisa's draft." The CEO's face lit with recognition, and he leaned closer to the camera. "Lisa," he said my name with clarity. "You did exceptional work. Exactly what we were hoping to see. This is the direction we want to pursue." There it was. Clean, direct, undeniable. The reversal landed not with noise, but with precision, cutting through every assumption that had been projected onto me. I felt all the eyes on me again. Not dismissive this time, not condescending. Shaken, aware. I gave a small nod. Measured, respectful, anchored. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet but grounded. Emotion tells the truth data can't always articulate. The CEO smiled. "Exactly." Around me, my colleagues sat frozen hands still, backs stiff, eyes wide with a realization they couldn't disguise. A few swallowed hard, trying to piece together how the narrative had shifted so dramatically without them noticing. They didn't know where to look. They didn't know how to recalibrate. They didn't know how to reconcile the version of me they had decided on with the one the CEO had just validated. And that was the moment, the exact second the reversal became complete. It wasn't the praise. It wasn't the credit. It was the quiet shattering of their assumptions. The truth rising above their doubt like light breaking through blinds. Slow, steady, inevitable. The meeting continued. Small talk, next steps, timelines, but the energy had shifted permanently. Their voices trembled at the edges. Their confidence thinned. Their certainty unraveled thread by thread. Meanwhile, I stayed perfectly still, breathing the same steady breath, holding the same calm posture, moving with the same quiet power that had brought me here. Because when the world finally recognizes what you've always known about yourself, you don't rise, you don't celebrate, you don't explode, you settle into truth, into self, into alignment. When the call finally ended, the screen went dark, and its reflection cast across the conference table a ghostly imprint of the meeting that had just changed everything. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence was thick, but it was no longer mine to carry. It belonged to them. They were the ones left undone. They were the ones recalculating. They were the ones feeling the weight of what they had missed. I gathered my notebook with slow, deliberate ease. The kind of ease that only comes when the truth has spoken louder than anything you could have said. I stood, straightened my posture, looked around the room one final time, and walked out not triumphant, not loud, but unmistakably in power. The hallway outside the conference room felt strangely warmer, as if the air itself had softened after the meeting. I walked slowly, not dragging, not rushing, just allowing my steps to match the calm that had settled into my bones. That kind of calm only comes after truth has surfaced in a room where it wasn't supposed to. After people have seen something they can't unsee. Behind me, I could hear the team dispersing in a scattered, disoriented haze. Even their footsteps sounded different. Lighter in volume, heavier in weight. A kind of quiet shame. A dawning recognition. Not guilt exactly, but awareness. I didn't turn around. Quiet power keeps its gaze forward. As I approached my desk, email notifications were already blinking across my screen like tiny sparks. Not chaos, just motion. The kind of motion that happens when a narrative shifts and people scramble to rearrange themselves inside it. A Slack message popped up first. Amazing work, Lisa. Didn't know you had that concept in progress. Loaded words. I didn't respond. Another. Congrats on the client call. Really strong. That message was from someone who hadn't even looked at me during the morning brainstorm. Then another. Would love to collaborate on the emotional direction. Happy to help. Help. Help with something they once called too emotional. I closed Slack. My peace wasn't going to be interrupted by their sudden enthusiasm. When I sat down, I felt something shift at the corner of my vision. One of the strategists, the same one who had said, we should prioritize logic, not feelings, was standing there awkwardly, clutching her notebook like a shield. Hey, she said softly. Her voice was small, timid, almost unfamiliar. I looked up. Yes? She opened and closed her mouth once before the words finally formed. I didn't realize the concept you sent was yours. It was really strong. And I think maybe we should have given it more attention yesterday. Her cheeks flushed. Just barely. She wasn't used to being the one off balance. I nodded once. Thanks. Nothing more. The acknowledgement was enough, not generous, not cruel. Just true. She waited, maybe expecting reassurance. A soft landing for her discomfort. I didn't give it. She left quietly. A minute later, the creative director appeared. He hovered beside my desk, hands in pockets, posture stiff. He looked like someone rehearsing an apology he didn't fully understand yet. "Lisa," he began. I waited. He swallowed. "Great job." The client was clearly impressed. "Your work really resonated." His tone bent awkwardly around the truth. Not admiration, not confidence, unease, recognition. He cleared his throat. "We, should have highlighted it more yesterday." Another pause. Another shift. Then the part he had been circling around. "Leadership is expanding the creative lead bench for this project. I recommended you." Recommended. As if the CEO's praise hadn't already made the decision inevitable. I didn't smile, didn't widen my eyes, didn't soften my tone. "Okay," I said, and the steadiness in my voice made his shoulders stiffen. Because okay from a black woman who has been underestimated for years is not neutrality. It is accountability. He nodded, probably relieved the moment was over, and walked away. I looked at my screen again. A new email notification had surfaced. Subject line: expanded role, creative lead direction. I clicked. A short message from leadership. "Lisa, given the client's response and the clarity in your concept, we'd like you to lead the creative direction for the emotional path forward. This will include guiding the team on narrative tone, storycraft, and overall conceptual development. Let us know if you need support." No fanfare. No over-the-top praise. Just authority, handed cleanly, without resistance. I leaned back in my chair, letting the words settle. I wasn't surprised, not even relieved, just aligned internally and externally. The justice wasn't in the title. It wasn't in the praise. It wasn't even in the reversal from the client. The justice was in the shift of knowing that I had moved with integrity when they moved with doubt, that I had trusted my voice when they questioned it, that I had stayed steady when they mistook my stillness for softness. A quiet victory, but a complete one. Later that afternoon, the energy in the office softened again. People approached me differently, gentler, slower, measuring their words before they spoke, not out of fear, out of understanding. Out of recalibration. A designer walked by and paused. "I'd love to know more about your process," she said. Someone else whispered, "Really proud of you." Another murmured, "About time." These weren't compliments. They were confessions. Admissions that they had underestimated what they didn't know how to see. I packed my laptop at the end of the day with slow, deliberate movements. The sun had dipped low through the windows, casting long gold lines across the office floor, the kind of lighting that makes everything look softer, truer. As I headed toward the elevators, I caught my reflection in the dark glass, my posture straight, my chin steady, my eyes lit with something sharp and quiet. This was me, not remade, not transformed, just revealed. The elevator doors opened, and as I stepped inside, I felt the final piece settle into place. Justice doesn't always arrive as an apology. Sometimes it arrives as clarity. Sometimes it arrives as recognition. Sometimes it arrives as the room finally shifting to the frequency you have always held. And sometimes it arrives in silence. Not the kind they used to diminish you, but the kind you choose for yourself. The doors closed. Soft, clean, inevitable. If you've ever been overlooked or underpaid, this part's for you. And if you feel that, hit that. The conference room is still, the echo of the client's words lingering in the air like a soft vibration. No one applauds. There's no dramatic gasp. Just silence, punctuated by the low hum of air conditioning and the distant tapping of keyboards from the adjacent workspace. I let myself feel it slowly, the gravity of what just happened. Every inhale is deliberate, measured. Every exhale carries away the tension that had lodged in my chest over weeks of subtle dismissal and skepticism. I glance around the room at my colleagues, their faces frozen in that peculiar mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. I could speak. I could announce my triumph. But I don't. Quiet power doesn't need a microphone. It resides in the steadiness of my posture, in the precision of my gaze, in the calm that flows through me like a river no one can disturb. My mind drifts back to the brainstorm, to the dismissive laughter and the whispered critiques. Too emotional, not enough data. I feel the memory like a pulse under my skin. It could have angered me. It could have made me snap. But I had learned long ago that emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing feelings. It's about seeing the currents before they crash. It's about moving strategically, silently, so that when the moment comes, you are ready to act, not react. I think about the other Black women I know in corporate spaces, the countless times we've been told our perspective is too sensitive, overly emotional, or not objective enough. We've been overlooked, undercredited, and underestimated. But here, in this quiet moment, I feel the truth. Our emotional intelligence, our subtlety, our intuition. It's a form of brilliance that doesn't need validation. It's a lens through which the world can be understood, a tool that shapes decisions before anyone else notices. I shift slightly in my chair and open my laptop again, scrolling through the concept I sent. Time-stamped, annotated, carefully crafted. No one knows the careful thought, the midnight revisions, the quiet planning that went into it. And yet, the impact is undeniable. The client's words, the CEO's recognition, the eventual promotion, it all speaks louder than any argument I could have made in that room. Results. Concrete. Measurable. Undeniable. This is the kind of victory that matters. Not a spectacle, not a loud confrontation, not a petty retaliation, but a smart, ethical triumph that honors your integrity and your craft. I think about my future in this company, my role as creative lead, and I understand fully that this is just the beginning. Every decision I make, every project I guide, every person I mentor, they will see this quiet strength in action. I let my thoughts drift to the larger community of Black professionals. We are often asked to fit into molds that were never meant for us. We are measured by standards that dismiss our culture, our emotional insight, our nuanced approach to problem solving. Yet here I am, standing in the proof that staying true to yourself, moving with integrity, and trusting your intelligence, emotional and cognitive, is more powerful than performing to fit someone else's narrow expectations. I close my eyes for a moment and breathe. I don't need to explain myself. I don't need to justify the hours of thought, the careful notes, the courage to act silently when everyone else doubted me. Integrity carries its own weight, and so does truth. When I finally open my eyes, I type a note to myself in the quiet of my office. Your value is not defined by their recognition. Emotional intelligence is not a weakness, it's your edge. Move with precision, act with integrity, and let your results speak louder than their skepticism. Stay true, stay unshakable, and never let anyone define the worth of your ideas. I lean back, letting the chair cradle me. The sunlight filters softly through the blinds, casting a warm grid across the floor, across the desk, across me. I am still quiet, still deliberate, still myself. But now, I am fully recognized, not by their standards, but by my own. My work, my ethics, my intelligence. They speak volumes, and the lesson is clear. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and the whisper lasts far longer than the echo of someone else's doubt. I rise, adjusting my blazer, feeling the subtle click of heels on polished floors. My reflection in the glass reminds me that confidence and integrity are not performances, they are choices. Every day, I choose to honor them. Every day, I choose to define my value, my voice, my space in this world. And that, I know, is a victory no one can ever take away. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this story. If it spoke to you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind us who we are. For every Black woman told to stay quiet, speak anyway.